Welcome to all of you, and thank you again so much for being with us today. It's really exciting to see all of your faces. As Vanessa said, I'm Shawn Salmon, and I am based out of Mountain View. And for the last 4 years, I've worked on managing and leading our global sales initiatives with Google Shopping. So what I wanted to do today is really think about how consumer behavior itself is evolving. So we're going to start by stepping back and thinking about the long view of retail, going back actually over time, and thinking about where are we today and where might the future be going. From there, I'm going to actually share some of the data that we've been really eyeing and poring over, both from Google and third parties, to show how I personally believe we're in the most exciting time for retail overall, given the rise of digital and mobile, and many of the themes I think both Mitch and Peter have already talked about. And then finally, I want to leave you with a few of my personal recommendations based on my experience talking with retailers over the last several years. What are the key questions we think you should be thinking about as you go back to your teams and think about organizing for that future? So let's jump in. So the store, this has really historically been the heart of the retail experience. And the origins of the store, as we think about them today, really came all the way back in the Industrial Revolution. So it was then, thanks to increasing efficiencies of labor and rapid urbanization, that you started to see the first big pivot to shopping as we think of it today. So late 19th century, you had rising prosperity, a growing middle class, and this is really when, the most iconic pieces of shopping architecture were first formed. So you had, for example, Bainbridge's, which is now owned by John Lewis, created in 1838. You had Au Bon Marché the same year actually in Paris. And then just a few years later, you had Lafayette, again founded. And what's amazing to me is that you can still sort of tour the cities of Europe and America and see some of these kind of monuments to shopping dotting the landscape of all of these cities. By the middle of the last century, you really saw, following kind of the deprivations of World War II, another big pivot in retail. So this was really an era where you saw major improvements to manufacturing processes, you saw the rise of new technologies, mass communications, and what all of this did for shoppers was actually create the demand for better assortment of products, much lower prices, and overall just a much more consistent experience shopping. This was the era, the era of Mad Men, the era of conspicuous consumption for really the first time. And this was also when you started to see department stores actually get larger. You saw the development of chain stores across small cities and towns. But what was consistent across these periods was, shopping really evolving from a transactional exchange of goods to something organized around leisure and pleasure at this, site we call the store. And by the end of the last century, you had this moment of incredible consolidation. So that was really when you saw the winners break out based on complete dominance of supply chain and the ability to drive even lower prices to consumers. So this was the moment when you saw breakouts in categories, able to offer, with the rise of the supercenter, everything under one roof in one category for everyday low prices. In the US, this was most remarkable with retailers like Best Buy, that basically dominated electronics. But you also have great icons from Europe like IKEA, which essentially revolutionized the experience shopping for home and garden. So those are our origins, right? The store, foot traffic, real estate, this sort of physical site where people can connect in a sort of consumptive, entertainment-based way for the first time. And one of the things I like thinking about is, if you're taking the long view, how does time translate to physical space? So if we were to sort of just pause and think about where's our future as an industry, what's essentially the country that's the most futuristic right now? And many have actually argued that that's South Korea. So Peter talked a lot about Asia. I'm equally fascinated, but it's this tiny little dot on the map of the world. So let's jump in and think about why. So raise your hand if this image actually looks familiar to you. It's from 2011. Yeah, actually, this is awesome. About good 40% of the audience recognizes this. So a couple years old now, but this is a picture of an experiment that Tesco ran in the Seoul subway stations in 2011. And the idea was to create a virtual store. So as shoppers, as consumers, as people were traveling home in the Seoul subway stations, the idea was, well, just let them take their mobile device, barcode scan an item, and then Tesco would run it home, so that ideally by the time you were finished with your commute, everything you needed for dinner was already there when you arrived. So kind of a revolutionary concept. And the question is, where is South Korea just a few years later, right? So essentially 4 years later, what's changed? How much further advanced is it? So McKinsey just published this really interesting study, I think about last month, on the market. And it's interesting, some of the data, fascinating data, but really shows a sharp contrast to those historical origins we talked about, where the store was really the center of everything. So what did the McKinsey data say? Well, first of all, it said that over 2/3 of the whole South Korean population owned a phone. So you could argue, well, it's not that impressive, it's kind of a small country, et cetera. But think about other mature markets. The US, the UK, they're at roughly 50% right now penetration. Australia, a little ahead at about 57%. So South Korea is way ahead on this one. Even more astounding is just the growth. So in basically a few years' time, they saw 4x increase in the total value of sales through mobile commerce, which is ridiculous in my mind. And finally, it's just on a pure sales basis, roughly 1 in 3 sales are now coming from mobile devices. We also know this from actual user behavior in the same study. 2 out of 3 people are comfortable purchasing and actively, regularly purchase on their mobile device. Again, compared to other mature markets, US is maybe at 1 to 4 right now. So really far advanced in a very, very short period of time. Now, if you're like me and you're kind of constantly hunting for headlines and you're thinking about where are we headed, what's going on in this space, I live in Silicon Valley, so I'm constantly bombarded with the latest tech and wild stories, some of which Peter talked about. You see a lot of these headlines, right? So ASOS partnering with Virtue Size. Whole idea is, let's create a virtual fitting room. Let's use 3D technology. How cool is this? I can try on an item, I can figure out if I like it well before I buy, and I can make sure it's literally the perfect fit for me, which is so cool. Obviously for retailers that helps, because then you reduce your total volume of exchanges and returns, which is great. Cortexica is another example. This is a super cool technology that was built out of a UK PhD thesis. Visual image search, essentially, advanced image search. And the idea here is, I could take a photograph of a jacket that I love with a pattern, and then the technology will actually let me do visual search for similar items and discover other apparel with that pattern. And even engagement rings, which I think is kind of a crazy category, you're starting to see some cool players in e-com that are partnering with companies to actually let you do a full 3D print model of the ring before you actually purchase. So really, really cool for high consideration items. And the question really is, as I think about it, which of these 2 futures matters more for each of you in the room for the next just 12 to 16 months, call it, just even look kind of short term? Is it this South Korea situation where you just have more people buying on mobile devices? Or is it this kind of crazy technology that we all think is going to be really cool and revolutionize how retail works? I think very, very strongly it's the former case. The South Korea metrics are much more relevant for each of us in the room for one specific reason. Everyone will be on a mobile device at some point. 100% of your total customer base will be on mobile. We know this is true. And potentially they'll be exclusively on mobile, which is a crazy concept to think about now. And so the question we look at Google, and something I think you probably have all heard about and thought about, hopefully, is this crossover moment. So what you're seeing in this graph is Google data for a specific unnamed market. And this is essentially looking at when in time will shopping queries for a particular category on mobile exceed those of desktop. And what I would love for all of you to think about is really for your own business, for your own market, when is this moment happening for you, and are you really actually ready for it? So we just released globally this metric, similar concept, crossover moment, across all categories. We know that we're already there. across everything in 10 markets, including the US and Japan. Literally billions of times a day, users around the world are taking out their mobile devices and asking Google for answers, looking for your products. Really what it means is that the net number of opportunities for you as marketers to reach those shoppers has just skyrocketed. It's a really powerful moment that we're in. The questions I think about, and the ones I most persistently and annoyingly ask retailers when I meet with them, are these. So, do you even know the % of time or resource you're actually spending in your own team or broadly in your organization on mobile today? Do you have targets set for the % of your sales that might be influenced by or directly come from mobile? And have you forecast what your growth contribution might be from mobile today, next 3 months, year, et cetera? 90% of the time when I ask these questions, most marketers don't know. And to me, I find that it's such a basic set of questions and incredibly complicated, mind you. I'm not saying any of this is easy, but I think these are really kind of the grounding facts we need to be thinking about as we organize for that future that we talked about. So let's look a little bit deeper at what those consumer trends are and what all of this means, especially in light of these sort of two pictures of this past rooted in the store and then this future where there's just this mobile device. So this is one of the most astounding facts and most powerful numbers that I have literally seen. I've been at Google for a very long time, and in the last many years, this one shocks me. So the number of searches with the terms near me, so essentially a location-based search, have increased 34 times in the last few years. And the vast, vast majority of these are coming from mobile devices. So essentially, as users are near stores, near all of your locations, they are increasingly attuned to looking for more physically based, environmental specific things. They're looking for things in their own vicinity. It could be a gym, it could be a cup of coffee, it could be a mall, it could be a gift shop. But the bottom line is that behavior is radically changing as a function of the mobile device, and this is especially true in the kind of near store situation. We also know this is true once the user is actually in the store. So it's equally powerful, the data we have that suggests that once that user is in the store, nothing actually changes, in fact, kind of the opposite. So we did a study last year with Ipsos, and this showed that shoppers in store found their mobile device to be essentially the most important thing they could possibly have their hands on while they were shopping. In our query trends data, we see similar things. So once a user's in the store, we see this stat is kind of unbelievable, an 800% increase in product category queries. So I'm in the store, I already know I want some lip gloss, I'm gonna all of a sudden do a ton more research using my mobile device while I'm there. Put these together, what you have is a really simple story that regardless of kind of where the user is, their behavior with the mobile device to shop is actually on the increase. And you all have, again, incremental moments to meet them while they're in that consideration moment. Amazingly, and this is also recently published data, the behavior is not just about search. It's true across all of our platforms. So this is YouTube stats, and arguably, once you look at them, you realize, oh my gosh, YouTube is becoming a shopping channel without anyone having to do anything about it. So YouTube's seeing 24% growth year on year in watch time for getting ready videos. Similarly, in some key categories, in this case food, subscriptions to these channels are increasing at astronomical rates. And millennial behavior in particular, you're seeing about 1 in 3 actually admit openly that their purchasing decisions have been increasingly influenced by those videos that they've watched on YouTube. We are developing in the shopping team some solutions to help you reach these users. They're the same ones on search, but obviously we want to be able to tie that together for you. But the bottom line is kind of regardless, again, of where that user is, actively searching or passively watching, there are more moments for you to actually be thinking about as a marketer. Similarly, and I love this graph is like ridiculously simple for an incredibly complex problem, and that's why we like it. The story is not just anymore about complexity within a channel. So over time, things have evolved, right? You're not any longer hearing stories of a dad looking at a newspaper ad and then organizing a trip for his family to go to the store on the weekend, right? If you look at just the last few years, I think we've all been obsessed with online-to-online marketing, right? What's happening in a cross-device world. But it's no longer the case that it's just that simple. It's also about online to offline, right? So thinking about kind of watching a video and then going to the store as a result. It's also about offline to online. So thinking about maybe I saw a TV ad for your business and then I started doing more searches. The bottom line is the path to purchase is basically completely complex. And for the same reason, my team has landed very quickly on just using this 2x2 for all these conversations to essentially radically simplify really what's become increasingly complex, but also really powerful for all of you as you think about all those touch points you might be able to meet one of your shoppers. I also want to point out, for those of you in the room, one of the fascinating things, and actually Peter gave a few examples of this is not a story that's just for traditional omni-channel retailers. Those of you who are just pure play e-com guys, I think one of the more exciting trends we're seeing is these business models starting to break, right? You see cases now of companies that start as e-com and evolve to having store locations. So Warby Parker is an eyeglasses company, and they were based out of New York, founded in 2010, super successful. One of the first things they did was partner with J.Crew, which is an apparel store, and actually leverage the J.Crew shelf to actually display some of their eyeglasses. Well, fast forward a few years, they now have 12 stores on their own in the US, which is pretty crazy. And their revenue per square foot is almost as high as Apple, actually. Pretty phenomenal story. Bonobos is another great example, men's apparel, based in New York. And essentially their platform, their story is, we're providing you, all the channels you want to actually reach us, including partnerships with traditional retailers, but also their own small format shops. So, if you're e-com and you're thinking about how to reach shoppers wherever they are, thinking about small format and offline really becomes super, super critical. From my view, I think these guys just got smart. This is where consumers are. They are fluidly moving because of mobile across channels all the time. And so the question becomes, thinking through your assets as a company, what are all the ways you want to have them experience you, and how do you meet them where they are? So really simply, the trend is people are shopping more, right? And when I say that, I think it's kind of a ridiculous, provocative statement. Really? Do we just shop more? Do we buy more? What's going on? That's so weird. But if you think about it, the average person now, favorite new stat I've recently learned, the average person checks their phone 150 times a day, right? All of us are laughing because we all know this because we do it ourselves. And I promise you, after you hear that, the rest of today, you're going to be like, okay, 5, 6, 7. But it's true. We're all there. We're all open to the experience of marketing at an net increased number of times per day. It's really a phenomenal moment, and also for the same reason, increasingly challenging, I would say. So who's doing well, kind of embracing this tidal wave of change? So I'll name a few retailers throughout the rest of this talk, and I love also hearing some of your examples during the break, so hopefully we can have a few conversations and tonight as well. Target is one really great example. So they're about a 50-year-old, pretty traditional retailer in the US. They've got about 1,700 stores, so pretty big physical footprint. And their innovation leader basically looked at how consumers were changing and basically said, we're toast unless we invest in mobile, basically. And so his mantra was, mobile needs to be the front door to our physical store. They've retooled their entire team. They invested in a bunch of new tech talent. And today, the vast majority of their shopper experiences start on mobile. Similarly, we know from working with them that of their Google searches that come, almost all their location searches are coming straight from mobile. So a pretty radical rethink of the relationship and a real embracing of, where meeting consumers where they actually are by enabling users to go fluidly between online and offline. What's the opportunity for all of you, as you think about working with your teams and taking some of this home? I think it's easy to say, hard to do, but the critical differentiator that I've seen over time is how thoughtful is the retailer being about measurement. And this matters for one particular reason, which is the path to purchase is just, very, very complicated to follow right now. And so if you're not setting thoughtful KPIs, and then you're not organizing your teams to support those KPIs that associate the right level of value wherever that user is, you're not actually organizing for that future moment. So this one is, probably I would say that the real differentiator I've seen of all of them, what helps a marketer get ahead. So the next trend I'm going to talk about is similarly simple at the surface level. And this is really about what shoppers want. So we did a study just thinking again about digital to store in particular. And this is data around what do we know shoppers are most hungry for as they plan their trips to the store. And the results are incredibly consistent. Essentially, shoppers want three things, and they want them consistently. One is price. They want to know how much the thing's going to cost. They want to know availability. Is it worth it for me to make the trip? Does the thing actually exist on the shelf? Because I want it now. And the third is location of the store. So, is it kind of close enough for me to get to? But, interestingly, as we found from a lot of third-party data, most of you in the room, most retailers in the world don't actually have the tech capacity to provide answers to these questions. In a way, retailers are significantly lagging behind consumers and what they want. So inventory accuracy and quality around inventory accuracy is only about 60 to 70%. I mean, that matters, right? That's a significantly low number, especially for maybe a high-value purchase that might bring a user to the store, and then you can upsell them and get even more value out of them. Similarly, only 1 in 3 retailers are actually able to give users in-store specific information. So we're thinking a lot about this sort of gap, but I think you could imagine a broad trend line where shopper demand is continuing to grow and retailer capability is falling behind, and that gap seems to be widening right now, which is really something to be thinking about as you understand what your teams are investing in. The result is simple, which is frustration. So same study, but essentially shoppers from these experiences left the store frustrated, 43%. And 41% were really clear in admitting that they were not likely to shop at the same place again. So lost opportunity for all of you. The bottom line is that as a function of digital and the ability to get answers to information, partly because of companies like Google, there's more and more demand from consumers. And the things we know they want are really simple. They want data, and so investing in IT is really, really key. They want convenience, and they want speed. They want it now because they know they can get it now. So on the data side, I talked a little bit, but it's really price availability and product reviews, associated data with the product. Pretty simple stuff in principle, but kind of hard to execute. For convenience, I pulled this visual from Mary Meeker's latest Internet Trends report, which is worth a read from everyone. I think this is fascinating, and living in Silicon Valley, it's astounding to see because a lot of these are SF-based companies, but what you have is an incredible investment in services oriented around convenience. So it's sort of a one-click mobile purchase combined with really, really fast delivery. So you've got Sprig, which does essentially food delivery. You've got Instacart with groceries. Lux is a new one that's pretty hot right now, which is for valet parking, which apparently is a big demand. And then you've got your Ubers and your Lyfts for transport. So just an incredible sort of peak of services that are playing around this sort of consumer convenience demand. Immediacy is, I'm sure you've heard a lot about this, and I know Mitch talked about it as well. This is just the idea that people want it now because they think they can get it now. Here I love thinking about this stat I found from McKinsey a couple years ago. They did a retail study, and they found that basically consumers that had the fastest click-to-deliver time, i.e. those that received goods the fastest, were actually the least satisfied with speed. Sort of counterintuitive, right? But actually what's happening is because users know they can get it fast, they want it fast. So we're actually training users and consumers over time to want more faster. Sort of strange. But the bottom line is this is the trend. This is where your shoppers are. This is what they are expecting, and it's just up to you to figure out if you're going to meet them there. So 2 cases of customers that are really trying hard to meet these demands. Home Depot is a home improvement company in the US. Again, really big store footprint, I think over 2,000 stores. Huge stores. I mean, this is like very prototypical American, like you walk in and you're totally lost right away because it's just so ginormous. What they're doing is in their app, they're actually giving all the data that I just referenced, real-time inventory and prices and all this stuff. But more importantly, they're giving, similar to Tango, which Peter just talked about, aisle-specific and really hyper-targeted location data for the thing you're looking for. And the idea there is, again, remove friction for the consumer between online and offline, help them get in the store, find the thing, and get out as fast as possible. Walgreens is another one, they're a drugstore. So they deal with a lot of repeat purchases of the same item, right? It's a prescription-based thing. A lot of Medicaid users in the US, it's an older demographic. And they're trying to merge digital to save users time, essentially, waiting in line. So you just buy through the app and hop in the store and pick it up. The store really becomes just a site for your inventory. And again, you're kind of helping blur the lines between online and offline for that user. Here, I think the kind of to-do is really thinking about your assets as a company. And I mean this broadly in terms of what are your brand assets, in terms of how do you want your customers to actually experience you online and offline? What's the kind of end-to-end experience? And what is the data in particular that you need to improve the quality of to make that possible? So thinking about just that simple price and availability problem, what is your basic level of inventory? What are people looking for? Do you have it available? Do you have it at the store level? Definite trend over the last few years to just see the companies where marketers and IT teams are working very closely together tend to have an advantage. Similarly, marketers and design teams. As soon as you have, a marketing team that's gotten really close with, consumer UX, all of a sudden there's that feedback loop, and you get to that kind of consumer-centric design experience, which is what users really want. So really key to be thinking about partnerships within your organizations. So the last trend I find kind of most intriguing, and in some ways sort of unexpected. So the idea here is that these customers that are moving across channels are actually just more valuable to all of you. So MasterCard did this study, and it was just released last year. And what they found was that customers that shopped with one retailer, both online and offline, spend 250% plus customers that just go through one channel. Crazy stat, right? IDC actually came out with a similar stat, which looked at lifetime value, 30% higher if you're actually working across channels. And presumably the hypothesis here is if you're digital and you're active on mobile, you're just a savvier purchaser. And that's what shows in the numbers. Quite simple. It's also corroborated by a bunch of other data we kind of already knew about. A few years ago, I'm sure all of you remember headlines, oh my God, the store is dead. Everyone's closing. In fact, it's interesting, the Gap in the US just announced they're going to close a bunch of stores, I think 2 days ago. So the trend is still happening, right? There's this downward pressure. And in fact, it's true. Foot traffic is actually down significantly for the last few years. But the story that's not told just as much is that the value of visits is actually increasing. So same-store sales for a lot of the data in this study were up 13%, and the total value is roughly double. So when you put all these things together, the bottom line is those digital shoppers are actually coming in with more considered purchases. When they get there, they're willing to spend more because they're coming in more thoughtfully. They have all the data they need. Hopefully you've provided it to them, and they're ready to go. And mobile, as we know, is actually the driver there. Mobile is the driver before they get there, and mobile is the driver when they get there. So this is actually a couple years old now. This is 3 years old data from Google, so I'm sure actually the numbers are significantly higher now. But in this case, what we found was that users who were looking for a store on their phone, so sort of location-based stuff, 66% actually visited, and then of those, 26% actually made a purchase. So again, if you're not there when they're looking, you really miss a complete opportunity to actually drive, high order values offline and answer their questions. Argos, I'm guessing, is with us today. We've been working with them on some case studies, some really interesting stats backing exactly the same story. Half of their customers' journeys start online in general, and 90% end up in the store. So completely consistent trends we're seeing. Sears Outlet is another one, crazy stats from them. This is from Q4 last year. We worked with them on some media and measurement solutions, drive to store, and they found that literally for $1 invested in digital media, they were getting 8 in offline sales. Their store visit rate also increased a ridiculous 122%. So we're really, really passionate about solving this connection between online and offline, in spite of all the challenges we know very well of helping organizations move to that future. This is why I think on this one, on sort of capturing that full value of the omni-channel shopper, it's really a leadership exercise first and foremost. What we've found over time is that it's the companies that have a challenger, an innovator mindset, someone that doesn't think in traditional silos, someone that's willing to look with fresh eyes at kind of what are our shoppers doing and where do we find opportunity. Those are the ones that actually get ahead the fastest here. It's really a leadership exercise first and foremost. So hopefully you don't feel too overwhelmed by the task ahead of you. I like giving people tough challenges. I do want to show one example just to highlight just how much change is possible, I think, to get organized for this future. So this is an image of company valuation for Macy's, which is a 150-year-old company in the US, 850 stores, massive presence, really traditional mindset. Their stock has increased 260% since March of 2010. And for those of you not aware, not exactly the fastest growing category on the market in the US right now, like traditional retail. So really complete outlier. And really what's happened is the leadership team, among others, throughout the organization, really just took a look and a step back and said, how do we need to retool our team? How do we need to invest in different kinds of talent? How do we need to reset KPIs in order to capture this new wave of growth that's possible today? And so what I wanted to do is just let them speak about kind of their experience. We're going to roll a little video that includes some of their tips from their VP of Media. So if you guys can roll the video.
I think the aha moment for us was 4 or 5 years ago when we really started to understand the impact that Macy's.com's business was having on the total.
We've been able to show that for every $1 we invest in search, we drive $6 of sales in store.
So our core customer are women 25 to 54. They are our lifeblood, and we've spent a number of years building that relationship with them.
One thing we know about customer is they want what they want. So when they go online, or they're on their mobile device, or they come into our store, they want that blue sweater in a size medium. The probability of her trading out that blue that she loves is very slim. We developed years ago the ability to expose our in-store inventory on the website. With Google local inventory ads, we're able to expose that local in-store inventory to the customer when she's on the go. So as she's 5 blocks from the store, sure, we can tell her she can click and buy from Macys.com, but we know that what's really gonna drive her action is to see that there are 8 right now in the store that's 5 blocks away in her size, in the color that she wants.
So if a search takes place on a mobile phone and a customer is near a store, she can go into that store and take advantage of that item. She can also click through that ad and purchase from Macys.com. And the bottom line is we're indifferent to whether she converts in the store or online. We just want her to shop with Macy's. So we've taken all of our insights from our partnership with Google and we've started to be a lot more flexible and a lot more neutral about where the purchase is taking place based on what we see really driving the business. And that incentive of growing the number of omni-channel customers is something that we have shared over the last couple of years.
We used to have 2 separate siloed budgets. We really now have one marketing budget, and we look at what's the best way to spend that. What's the best allocation? What's the best media mix? Whether it's digital, offline, how do they work together to deliver, yeah, of course, the most sales, but really that best customer experience.
So hopefully you could all imagine getting to a point of saying we're indifferent where the customer comes from. It's just about total value for that customer. That's really the bar. And by no means is Macy's, done, figured it all out. I mean, this is a journey, but they've pivoted really hard and fast. And it's amazing to me that you can see it in literally their public valuation, just in the way that they've organized their team. It's had real impact in a very short period of time. So 3 takeaways, I think, for everyone to think about. Just to recap, I think the first is really around defining success. We all know this future is coming. We know squarely where it sits. What are the KPIs that matter? Are you actually incentivized around them the right way? Are there folks both in your own team, your peer group, your senior management team that you can push to rethink and to challenge the right measurement to actually capture this new world that we're living in? The second one's around your assets, and this is really about thinking through your brand assets, your total set of touch points with the consumer, and then how do you kind of tie all of that into one end-to-end experience that gives a holistic view of who you are as a company to that shopper. And then the last one is, I think, really personal. It's really about what role do you particularly want to play in challenging norms and thinking through how you can help your own company get ahead in light of some of the changing consumer behavior we see today. So those are my 3 questions for you. Good luck on the challenge, and I look forward to meeting more of you outside. Thank you very much.